The Power Query Editor. Let's have a closer look at the Power Query Editor that I've got on the right hand side here. What I can clearly see on the left hand side is I have 3 queries. So that is what I have currently imported and connected to or got. These queries are not in alphabetical order, but I could drag customers and lift it up and make it the first, and drag orders and lift it up and make it the second. So you can easily just drag these queries and put them in the order other than the order that you imported them. Now on the right hand side you can see the query settings. If you can't see the query settings, it may be that you've got to go to View, and in the View you can turn on the button Query Settings or turn off the button Query Settings. So as I click this, I hide and show my query settings, and I'll go back to Home. Now the query settings first of all tell me the name of the query. So as I click on Sales 2021, I can see the name of that query there, and I can see customers there. I could, if I wanted to, click in there as well and change the name of that query if I felt that the name wasn't very clear and I needed to make it clearer for others so that they could use the query effectively. I've also got the option All Properties, and if I go into there, that's another location that I can change the name of a query or maybe apply a description so that people that use this particular data can understand what that query is. So those are helpful as well. Now on the right hand side, if I collapse or expand, that's an option as well. But if I expand the applied steps, I can see that 4 steps has occurred with the customer's query. The first step, if I click on it, was the source. It tells me the source of, or the location of, the Excel workbook that was brought in. Then the second thing it did is it navigated and brought in the data. And then the third thing it did is it promoted, if I go back one, it promoted this first row to become the column headings. And then the fourth thing it did is it looked at the data types. Now you'll notice the data types say ABC 1, 2, 3, which means that any type of data could exist in those columns. So it examines and detects the data types when it does this fourth step. And so when I click this, I can see there's been some changes now in the data type. So what does this mean? This means that when you get data and you bring it into Power Query, it naturally performs a series of steps, and most of the time it performs at least 4 steps. The source, navigating to the data, promoting the first row as a header, and detecting the data types of each column to be more exact. So if I click on Sales 2021, those are its 4 steps, and I can investigate those. And if I click on Orders, I can again do the same thing. And so as we transform the data in these various queries, you're going to see more and more steps appear on the right hand side, which means that every time you refresh your connection to that data source, it naturally performs those steps and transform the data into a useful format. Okay, so the data types, I'm clicked on Orders here. The data types, this little button here means that this is a date column. This little ABC means this is text. And as I scroll to the right, most of them are text until I get to units. Units is a whole number. That's why I see a 1, 2, 3. And net includes decimal places. So this is a decimal number. So the data types are actually little symbols that appear to the left of each of the column headings, telling you the nature of the data that's in those columns. So what if that's all I wanted to do with those queries? That's the only amount of transformation I wanted to apply. How do I then load that into Power BI? Well, the idea is if I go to this button here, Close and Apply, and it does have a drop down where I can just apply and just close, but if I go Close and Apply, what it will do, and let me just maximize Power BI, is it will load the data and create a model, loading to the data model. Here we go, all complete. Maximize that. On the right hand side you now see fields. Let me just stretch this so you can see things a little bit clearer. But on the right hand side in the fields task pane are the 3 queries that I've loaded now from my Power Query. And each one has what they call a chevron in the front of it where I can expand the customer's query and collapse it, expand the orders query and collapse it, and expand the sales query and collapse it. So I've naturally loaded the data now into Power BI. But what if I suddenly realize that I do have to transform one or more of these queries and I need to get back to Power Query? That's when you go for this Transform Data button. Use this button to go back to Power Query Editor. So I click that button and I'm back in the Power Query Editor and I'm able to start transforming my data again. So you can easily transform using Power Query and switch back and forth between Power Query and Power BI. Now, when you're sitting in Power Query, you may notice there's a button called Data Source Settings. This button's important because if I click this button, what it does is it tells me the location where these queries have come from. And so if, for example, the file has been moved, I may have to change the source of where that file is actually located. So if you do move the files so that the connection remains intact, you may have to update the data source or change the data source. And so that is what that button is there for.